Hello, this is the first episode of From Ireland to Palestine. This is going to be a podcast focusing on Palestine activism in Ireland. So we're going to be bringing on a lot of activists from the various groups around the island. There's a deep reservoir of sympathy for Palestine in Ireland, so we want to bring some of that energy and some of those ideas to a wider audience. But it's not just going to be confined purely to Ireland. We're going to be bringing on specialists and experts from around the world who can shed some light on how everyone watching can contribute to help what's one of the most urgent causes of today. So people probably don't want to hear me waffling on continuously. I'll move on to our first guest here. His name's Martin Rafferty, and I know him well because he's in the same group that I'm part of, BDS Belfast. He brings a wealth of experience and knowledge about activism, and he certainly taught me a lot. So, Martin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much, Patrick.
It's a bit weird doing it here.
It is a bit weird, yeah, but sure, we'll get through it. And yeah, I think I've learned just as much from you, to be saying, blow me up too much.
Usually we'd be talking in your car. I feel like we should bring all the equipment down to your car and do it there instead.
Yeah,
be more natural. Or outside Home Bargains or something.
Yeah.
So, something I never asked you, but I was always curious about is I know you're really politically engaged, and you could have turned your hand to any number of causes. So why, obviously, it might be obvious to people now, given the acceleration in the genocide over the last 2 years, but you've been involved for much longer than that. And what got you invested in Palestine activism in the first place?
Well, I was thinking back there. I remember whenever I was about 14, there's this guy who used to come to our house. I lived in the Falls Road every week with a magazine. And I didn't really understand, and I was reading through it and stuff. And he was Palestinian, and he was he was then trying to push the cause, because back then there was a lot of different people coming to Ireland with different causes, and groups compete with each other. We had the Bass, had people from everywhere really. I just struck talking to him. I used to read it, and he used to stand and talk to me about it. He's an older man. I was just a child, but he took the time and listened, and I was asking him questions and stuff. So what kind of gave me a wee bit of a interest in what was going on there. I didn't understand too much, but as I was going through, my early teens and stuff, and then in the mid-20s, and I was just seeing the parallels. Seeing the parallels, seeing what was going on in the occupied territories, it was similar scenes to what
in the 80s would that be then?
In the 80s, similar scenes what we were witnessing, because our around here at that time was a military state too. You had the foot patrols, you had the cordon off, you had the one way in, one way out of West Belfast, and the controlled movement and things like that. So it was always something, that I did feel. I don't know what I didn't. I just didn't know what it was, but I always felt it was very, very similar, because there were similar scenes in other places as well. Just maybe people who I'd talk to could talk to them easier and stuff. And then as it was going on, and I spent time in jail myself, for political actions here, and we were communicating with different groups around the world again, different political prisoners, and so I just seemed to have this thing with the Palestinians, and obviously as we're getting into politics and getting into history and seeing just how direct,
the connection was.
Just how we've kind of crossed paths so many times throughout history with the colonial projects going on in Palestine and here in Ireland, and going way back. But even whenever they partitioned Ireland and then the partitioned Palestine, 1917 onwards, and it was actually the same characters who were involved in what they were doing here. They were doing the same in Palestine, So whenever I'm helping, we've been listening to the call from Palestine, because that's one of the things you learn being a political activist. You don't do what you think you should do. You do what the people that are telling you to do. We have been listening to different calls from and stuff, and whenever the BDS when this shift took off, I think it was in 2007. And then we all decided among ourselves, different people do what we can with that, and we're slowly we were building different wee things we could try to do to bring pressure to bear on whoever was kind of having dealings with so-called Israel. And then I think it was in 2018 that the Northern Ireland team, as they call it, was playing the Israeli team, as they call it, and people, a lot of us all were in Belfast from different persuasions and different backgrounds, some not necessarily even involved with Palestinian struggle things, decided this game's not, we're going to make sure that if it does happen, it's going to be the last one to happen, and we'll put all our energies together, and we had a great success with that. So I've always had this draw towards Palestine,
So it would have been 2007, sorry, you would have really got?
No, I would have done the like the direct, whenever we were told this is what we want people to do,
do.
we started getting involved with some BDS stuff, you know.
Aye, so it was more like when you'd apply direct action to it.
Yeah,
more,
yeah. Before that would have been maybe standing over what we called sometimes some money and stuff, and then we always wanted to stay in contact with different comrades over in Palestine as well. Palestinians come over, would have hosted them in the houses and things like that, but that would probably be more like kind of below the surface kind of activism, you know.
Just smaller thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously we're involved with the BDS campaign. So for maybe people don't know what actually is BDS, what does it stand for? What's the goal of the movement?
BDS, boycott, sanctions and divestment. And as I said just the other, it was a call from civil society in Palestine. You know, they looked at the model in South Africa, the apartheid regime there, and the boycott campaign, and how successful that was. How that was one of the main catalysts that pushed the breaking down the segregation in South Africa. So they saw this as a sustainable means. You know, it's lawful, it's peaceful, and so it's very, very easy to sustain it long term. You know, and the boycotting, which we would be heavily involved with, boycotting any Israeli products, any Israeli goods and things like that. The sanctions, sanctioning anybody at all who's complicit in it, you know, and divesting like the universities, the banks, and things like that. So we see it as a great initiative, and obviously Palestine, it has done so much for the cause of Palestine, you know, and it's so easy for people to apply because it's in every area of life here in Ireland and everywhere else. You know, anybody's involved with the arts, anybody's involved in business, anybody's involved with sport. You know, there's always somewhere, unfortunately, where you can identify, well, this is, you know, there's really influence here, and you can to play your part in whatever sphere you're in to, you know, to help the Palestinian cause.
That's a bit what is likely to affect Zionism most is materially affecting them. That's what Israel feels most threatened by. They've admitted it. That they say BDS is the thing they're most afraid of.
Oh, of course, and that's why they put so much energy into trying to bring it down. You know, there's so many states in the US, and they made it illegal to be involved in any BDS actions. Other countries around the world who would be Zionist allies ban BDS activism and stuff like that, and that's because they fear it. That's because that's the one thing that's put them under serious pressure. When you see, especially today, whenever the so-called leaders of the world, you know, the ones who are supposed to look after the human rights of the people, you know, the dignity of the people, the legality of the world order, are totally failing. And within countries as well, governments with their people are expressly telling their governments, we want you to do this. They're totally, here down in 26 countries is a classic example, where there's a massive support for the Palestinian cause because of the connection, and the government just ignore it, and they're giving window dressing every now and again, saying the odd statement, but behind the scenes they're totally complicit. You know, one of the biggest
participants. I always say the word participant because, like, if you're allowing Shannon to be used,
of course,
or you're just buying vast amounts of Israeli products, like Ireland's apparently the second biggest importer of Israeli products.
Yeah.
So if you're going that far, you're actually a participant in genocide, not merely complicit.
Yeah, and I suppose for a neutral country.
Yeah.
A so-called neutral country. You know, so, and that's again, the BDS is a great vehicle to expose that. You know, so it's not just exposing the Israeli influence in the country, but also how politicians, unions, anybody at all who's complicit. You know, how you get on board with BDS Belfast, so you'll do your bit to expose the ones who are also complicit within their own countries, you know.
That's empowering too. It's like something every individual can do on a day-to-day basis as well.
Well, I'll give you a wee bit of a brief background of why we do what we do and the way we do it.
Yeah.
You know, after the football match in 2018, it was a brilliant day and put so much pressure. Like, you know, we could have, if we had that many people, we could have went into the stadium, but we realised because of the sectarian nature of the place here and the segregation, it would have just backfired. It would have just been took away from what we were doing that day. But everyone in the north and further field, was no doubt that these two teams were playing. You know, normally they would have played, they would have a few photographs. The Israelis would have used it for their propaganda. The Northern Ireland would have used it for their propaganda, and that would have been the end of it. And from the end until now, there's never been another friendly. You know, so I don't think there ever will be again.
Yeah.
So out of that, I do think it was probably one of the best protests there had been for Palestine. So out of that, a few of us kept in communications, and we thought, because like every other campaign, protest group, political campaigns, there's always toxicity among different groups within it. You know, environmental, animal rights. Anybody listening to this will know it's one of the biggest things you have to bear is when there was a breakdown of personality, communications, or whatever else, it can breed into hostility within groups. And it's a fact, within the Palestinian groups too, we have to concede that. So what we thought was, well, what we could do here is just have one single issue campaign. Use this more as a kind of a platform rather than a group. Like the first couple of years, we kept saying we're not a group, we're a platform. We're not a group, we're a platform.
Still doing that.
Still doing it, but everybody just sees us as a group, But what we envisaged was this to be a platform for anybody from any group. Once you walk into this room, you leave whatever you've got at the door. When we talk about, okay, this week, say the target's going to be Barclays, what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, we'll make sure we've got the leaflets, we make sure we've got that, or we're going in and we're standing outside, all the practicalities just for that target. And that's all we're hoping just to talk about. Once that one's done, next week we'll come again, review how we've done that, and then move on to the next one. And we're still here. I think it's been a long time, and there's been a lot of people coming and going, and we don't see for way and coming back and stuff. And that's another thing too. We say it's like we're not members of anything. You come here if you want to do it. If you believe in what we're doing, then come in and do it. You can do it once a month, once a year. You can do it every day. But as long as you come in, this is what you do, and you're bought into it. So that's one of the biggest things we think is we do target shops an awful lot. And the reason why we do that is because we're not just putting pressure on. We do see murder. We do see if the Israelis can't sell their peppers and their avocados and potatoes, bringing potatoes to Ireland, with our history, our legacy of our genocide. So if they can't sell them, if they can't sell the likes of their wipes and any products, then them factories that make them, that land that's been stolen by Palestinians that grows that, they become defunct. There's really getting a lot of money sent by endless amounts of money by the US and by different countries, and there's trillions held in the islands, offshore islands everywhere. The money's there to keep throwing at it, but if they don't have the infrastructure, if they don't have people they employ in the factories, if the stuff that they're growing all rats, it can't be portrayed as a normal society. So we do see merit in that in the actual closing down these avenues off them to sell stuff. But more importantly, what we see is people. It's a low level direct action, and anybody can do it. And you don't need resources for it or anything. And it's an empowerment. People will come into the shops maybe for the first time and they'll be very nervous and be saying, you're okay, might be doing what we're doing.
Maybe talk just a wee bit if people aren't familiar exactly what we do. Like, what would the typical action look like?
We'll get into the shop. What we used to do, we used to stand outside the shops with leaflets with whatever product is in the shop. For an example, say it was Lidl. They were selling for a while fresh products with a picture of the product. We're giving people leaflets, asking them not to buy them, but we're doing that for a while, and then we decided, okay, we're going to start getting into the shops and putting stickers on the things as well, and we're removing them from the shelves, displays, and whatever, and bring them up to the customer services, and we would ask the customer services not to restock them. So that's what we do on a daily basis in the shop. So that's the practical direct action. So it's not a very high bar, direct actions. Anyone can get involved in that. But what that does, as I was saying, that empowers people. People who have never done anything before but feel so helpless about what's going on in Palestine, and they're not up for doing mad stuff and maybe don't have time for other things. This is something you can go in, you can do, and you do feel a sense of achievement because it doesn't take long. If we start targeting the shop, okay, they might always remove the products, but the dwindle. We're going into shops in West Belfast, and 4, maybe 5 trolley loads would be in the shops anytime we're working in, and that's down to very rarely on the shelves. But if they are on the shelves, there may be 1 or 2 baskets. So that's dwindled, and also we have had successes with a lot of stores who just completely removed the stuff from their shelves altogether.
Like Lidl, going on to that here, that was maybe our biggest success in recent times was the Lidl win. Right?
Yeah.
Where Lidl Ireland and Lidl Northern Ireland entirely stopped selling Israeli products.
Yeah. So. And that was down, there's a continuation of what I was saying there. Because it's such low level and so easy to do, it resonates with people. So what we found, and we were a bit taken back, just so many people were getting in contact with us, not just within Belfast, but within 6 counties, all of Ireland, England, as far away as New Zealand and Australia, asking us, how do we do it and how can they do it? And you remember what we did then was people throughout the whole of Ireland were getting in contact. We have an activist pack. Anyone who gets in contact with us and asks us they want to start doing what we're doing, we would have a talk with them, preferably maybe on one of the
Signal maybe, yeah.
And talk them through how we started and what we did. We send them a pack with all our leaflets, letters we give to the shops, to the managers and things like that. And so it's kind of, we like to think it's a kind of rounded advice we give to them, and then they replicate what we're doing. So whenever we're spreading throughout the whole of Ireland, and people were just, hitting different things, we thought it'd be a good idea to try and get it coordinated. We had an All-Ireland group where every Sunday, no matter what people were doing the rest of the week, they were doing the rallies or whatever they were doing, highlighting in their own fashion. But at 1 o'clock on a Sunday, we all hit our local Tesco store and made people aware what was being sold, how this was contracted back to fund the genocide in Palestine, and how, more importantly, the people in the community connect. When you're seeing the horrific scenes on the screens and stuff, and this is what you can do directly. That's going to directly affect the Zionist state. And it took us a few months, and everyone was saying to us, you've picked the worst ones to pick. Little
committed Zionist,
Zionist who owns it, and it's never going to happen, and it happened.
Happened, quite quickly actually. From the moment we put intense pressure. Go ahead.
So that was the biggest store, like the retail store in the whole of Ireland that does these kind of things, veg and like household things, that took all this really stuff off their shelves.
Yeah. That inspired a lot of people as well. So at the moment we're focusing on home bargains, right?
Yeah.
That's like the next worst one.
Home bargains, again, committed Zionist. He's actually went over to Israel, pledged in his support.
Mm-hmm.
And he does.
Morris family.
Yeah. And they do heavily monitor the cameras in the shops, because we've been told that if stuff isn't on the shelves, they're throwing away, isn't that stuff on the shelves. And we were doing it in 6 counties because it's only a 6-county wide branch. They don't have any in the 26 counties. But then people from England who we've made contacts with through the Little campaign started getting involved as well. And we've been told that whenever it was just contained to the 6 counties, there wasn't much fuss from head office.
Yeah.
But as soon as it started spreading over to England, Scotland and Wales, now they're under pressure.
Mm-hmm.
And every week, every couple of weeks, there's always someone getting contact with us, or someone said there's another area's doing it there too. So it is growing, it's growing and growing, and we keep trying to drum this message in. The more people that do it, the quicker it's going to happen, because it's going to happen. We're not going to stop until it happens. But the more people that do it, the more pressure gets put on that company, the more money they're losing, because the things that we've been told, people aren't buying the things, but we want them totally removed from the shelves. So the more people do it, the quicker it will be to have the victory with them. And then once we finish with that shop, then we move on to another target.
Yeah, well, that's the whole idea of the BDS campaign, is this focused targeting of shops. I mean, people sometimes get these enormous lists of things they're supposed to boycott, which is a bit overwhelming, and then they probably just give up entirely.
Yeah.
But our campaign is along the same sort of idea, that you keep a very focused targeting of one highly complicit company and just hit it over and over and over and over again until it cracks.
Definitely, right? And it makes it so much easier. If we were standing outside a shop with a list of 35 items not to buy in the shop, it's never going to happen, And what we do find now that people do, once people get kind of like their activism starts getting into them, then they start not buying the other stuff as well. There wasn't aware of that. And then when I started looking into, and we give them information about the BDS lists and stuff, so they do go and they come back to us and say, God, I didn't realise this, that and the other. So it's something that we think because you get to so many people, everybody goes shopping. Not everybody goes online and researches what should be on the list of stuff, but everybody goes shopping. And if we're there physically, it is. And like one of the things that I noticed when we were doing Sainsbury's, and Sainsbury's and I have 3 of us in court.
Mm-hmm.
Trying
to... I'll get up that later, probably, like prosecutions for that, yeah.
But whenever they put banning orders on us, and then we stood outside the shop, taking people's signatures, a complaint form about the stuff being sold. It was great that we had over 2,000 complaint forms, but also we had was over 2,000 conversations with people.
It was 4,500 in the end for Sainsbury's.
Was that for the whole lot, or was that for Sainsbury's?
Just for Sainsbury's, it was 4,500. And then we had like that's another 1,000 for Lidl,
Right,
and like
aye.
probably like close to 1,000 for Home Bargains
Right,
as well. So it was a
right.
huge amount for just like a few
Yeah,
shops.
aye, that's even better than I thought. But we had them conversations, and that was like we were standing there. Sometimes people would say, "Great, I support you" and stuff, and I don't know. But then sometimes people stand for 20 minutes pouring their heart out.
Yeah, yeah.
It was like a therapy session as well. You know, people are traumatized by what they're seeing.
Yeah.
You know, but we made the point of making everybody know. See you saying in this piece of paper here, that's just as important as what we do, because without people like yourself supporting us and doing what we're asking you to do, then it won't happen. And another thing too, it breaks down this myth of we're powerless. For sure, what can one person achieve? You know, we give them examples of the victories we have, and it gives people that sense of, well, I can do something about it. You know, and it also gives some I think some people the feeling, well, I've done something. When I'm witnessing, I felt so helpless, and you do see people being lifted when they come out, you know, and sometimes we're giving people stickers and asking them to do, you know, take the stuff, and they were doing it, and they were buzzing coming out. I took it, and I put it onto the
Take a Sabra off the shelf.
yeah,
And things like that.
and they were
Yeah,
buzzing
yeah.
because they'd done it, you know, and that's, you know, it's rewarding as well to see that, you know, within our communities, because for so long there's been such, you know,
Disempowerment.
yeah, and people have believed that myth, you know, that we're powerless, for all individuals, look after yourself and don't worry about anybody else, you know. So it's
The broader message there, like we get
Yeah.
that a lot, and that's people often say to us, "Oh, why does nobody care?" I don't think it's so much a question that people don't care. It's a question that people are disempowered. So people will say, "Oh, it's awful, but what can you do?" Mm-hmm. So they're kind of resigned to the fact that you
Yeah.
can't change anything. And what we said to people is, if people historically had that attitude, there'd be no health service, there'd be no weekend, there'd be no sick pay, there'd be nothing. You'd just be working 100 hours in a factory 6 days a week,
Yeah.
like people were in the 1800s. You have to accept that it's proven evidence that people power does have an effect, has had historically and will have again, right? Yeah.
yeah,
So just moving on to like other campaigns we've done, like we've done recently, or on a number of occasions, the BBC.
yeah.
So like maybe speak a bit about the BBC's complicity in all this, like how lousy its coverage of the genocide
Yeah.
has been, and why we targeted them and what those actions were.
Well, we do think that the BBC are totally complicit, but then the BBC, you have to understand their history and who they are.
Yeah.
Of course, they're going to be complicit. You know, they're the mouthpiece of the empire. They always have been. And like with all the access people have to social media and stuff, nice stuff, most people just tune into the BBC and think, well, the BBC says it because we're told time and time again it's the most reliable source of information.
And people do trust it. It still
They
comes
do-
out as
do
like it's the
trust
most
it,
trusted
you know,
source,
it's
even though it isn't
it's like one of
trustworthy.
the last bastions of the Britain that we know kind of thing, you know, the little Englers and stuff like that. But people here do think as well that it's a trusted source of information.
Yeah.
So then we just done what we did then. We tried to bring to people's attention that not everything you hear in the BBC
It's true.
is true. And we've went into the BBC a few times and occupied it, and there's been a few great members of the BDS actions here who put together like a script of how the BBC report things and how they're being reported by people on the ground and other people who like Algeciras and stuff. And reading those, standing there, first of all, we do think you have to grab people's attention because it is, you know, we're competing with everything. And getting in and making the occupation and all that, that does a wee bit of drama. And then that brings people like, oh, what's going on here? You know, and to see the police in the background and stuff.
Getting into the BBC is always like the most dramatic part.
Oh,
like
it is,
firing
because
past
they're trying to
security,
get us out. You know, we're running and the security cars are trying to get to the door and we're getting in. You know, we're jostling and stuff and we're getting in and we're unfeeling everything, or the bags we've hidden and stuff. You know, it does look pretty dramatic. But then that's good because then people will hopefully listen and they'll listen to how the BBC reports an atrocity. Don't even call it an atrocity. How they report an event, as they would call it, and then exactly what happens. And this is exactly what happened. This is what you're being told, and this is the actual
actually
facts.
happened.
The actual facts of what's happened here. You know, so we do think we're never going to change the BBC. The BBC are what they are. But what we want to do is to make people aware that what you're listening to isn't necessarily the truth here. You know, what they're betraying isn't what's going on over there, and you need to step up to the mark and try and do something. You know, do something about this. Even get the knowledge of it, so you can challenge the narratives being betrayed by the right wing here and the BBC. So we went into the BBC
3 or 4 times, is it? Yeah.
4 times. We went into one. We actually did it a few years ago.
Okay, yeah.
You know, we went in a few years ago, a couple of times, to highlight the fact that what was being told wasn't true. But whenever it intensified, after the genocide intensified, I think we've been in maybe 4 times, twice in the reception of the main BBC, and then twice was it? No, sorry, 3 times.
Three times actually, yeah.
And then the last one we would actually get into the broadcasting studio,
Blackstaff,
and had the apparatus. What we used, I think it was maybe Crawley's or Stephen Nolan's.
Sure, someone said, yeah, that like the studio was just laid out there for us.
Like a radio, and then we had our own radio
broadcast.
reporting.
Yeah, so it's like the real news, essentially.
The real news.
Gone from the heart of the BBC, what they should be saying from the seats we were sitting in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
so that's obviously they've tightened up their security, and so from then to now, a weekly loud protest outside.
Using Blackstaff, yeah.
I say Blackstaff using bin lids, because you can hear all this inside. You know, the people inside, people say they're workers, but they're making a choice here. They're making a choice to get the wages every week to tell these lies, to cover up a genocide. So we have to, we had to bring attention to it. And it's a bit uncomfortable for them hearing the bin lids and the banging and stuff, but everybody walking past look and see what is this, and then the speeches are given and people hear that. And also it's another way of attracting the social media people to saying what's going on here. This is a wee bit different, this what way they're doing this.
I would suggest people go on our social media, BDS Belfast, Instagram and Facebook, and watch some of those actions, because you do not only, is it a good example how to do direct action, it's what you say, there's a lot to learn on it. Mm-hmm. Another one which we use heavily for getting information for those is a Instagram page and an app called News Cord. That's the one, I'll give them credit, Damien's the one that puts these together most of the time in our group. That's a really good resource for just seeing what the BBC says and what alternative news sources are saying, Middle East Eye and Al Jazeera and the like of it. I suppose the last major action might be worth talking about is that one at QUB, where we tried to interrupt Clinton's visit, Hillary Clinton's visit, and the whole manhandling, assaulting basically of students that went on when they tried to unfurl the Palestine flag on the lawn.
Yeah, right. Well, shall we just talk through what happened then?
Yeah.
So we were made aware that Hillary Clinton and Kennedy were going to be here at this. It was a past night. Was it a trade fair?
I think it was some kind of trade fair, some kind of business conference. I think it was. Clinton was going to be in Whitla Hall.
Yeah.
So we tried to get in there.
And Joe Kennedy was coming as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been working with some of the students in Queens who've come on board with our state of direct actions, and we thought, this is a good opportunity maybe of putting a lot more pressure on Queens, because Queens rely heavily on international students, particularly from China. And it's a well-known fact that the Chinese are very precious for their children, and before they go anywhere or send them anywhere, they research heavily. Is this a safe place for me to send my child? So the last thing Queens want to see is any kind of direct action in Queens.
Yeah.
So we bear that in mind whenever we undertook, right, this is what we're going to be doing here. So we knew they were coming. We knew what hall they were going to, and we also knew there was going to be a ring of steel around the whole campus. But then we saw a opportunity, a wee glitch in the chain. So we went a few days before. We worked out how we were going to get into a certain building, very close to where Clinton was going to be getting out of her car, and at the same time, the students were going to unfurl the massive Palestinian flag that Gale Force Art have made. And generously,
on the lawn at QUB
they give it to us all the time, anytime we need it. Gale Force Art have to get a shout out here because they're brilliant at what to do. So they were going to unveil the Palestinian flag at the same time as we were going to go in to try to get into the hall to disrupt the meeting. We didn't think there was going to be riot cops over. Didn't think they were going to be as heavy-handed as what we were going to be. It was just
on some kind of, I don't know if Secret Service or what it was, but like one with the earpieces and American accents. And so on.
Once we went running towards Clinton, there was people with American accents for shouting, "We've been breached! We've been breached!" Actually, one of the guys there, he got kicked by one. He got a knee and put down to the ground. So once that happened, then the cops just, we had breached it. And it delayed Hillary Clinton's speech by maybe 8 minutes, maybe. Joe Kennedy couldn't get in at all. He had to turn back.
He cancelled it.
He couldn't get into the hall. Yeah. So once we'd done that, and at that stage I got arrested. Everybody else was okay, but I got arrested. And then the guys went out to undo the flag. And bear in mind, we've done this flag before on that lawn, and we've done it since on
October
that
the
lawn.
7th. It was like when we did a big day of actions on October the 7th, 2024.
Yeah, so that was one of the things we've done then, and we've done about after that. I think that the police were heavily embarrassed the fact that we got so close there and they took it out on the students.
Yeah.
I think if it hadn't been the case, they would have got to put that flag out. This is a right. It was an area that actually wasn't even cordoned off. There was no barriers around that.
No, it was different. Like the Whitla had like steel barriers all around it, whereas the lawn was just.
And we climbed over them barriers, so they didn't even have to. They just went to do the flag, and the response from the police. I think everyone has seen that, and it was totally.
It was assault, basically.
It was assault, and it was totally overreaction. And I do think it was because they were so angry because they were exposed at whatever happened. I think it was 20 minutes before that. Whenever we made our move, and I think it just reverberated all around the world. Them pictures went everywhere, went global, and we have found since then. Anytime we've went to do direct actions in Queens, the security coming up to us, asking us what it is we want, and they're facilitating. Like the last one, they had a trade fair, and there's complicit companies there. I think there was maybe 5 different complicit companies.
Including ones implicated in the arms trade, basically. Combs Aerospace, people like that.
One's being
Martin Baker's, I think, was another one.
Ejector seats for the military and stuff, things like that. And they told them ones to pack up and go.
Mm-hmm. Within about 15 minutes.
In 15
we were
minutes.
all, and then they packed up, and the man was coming to us with like a menu saying, do you want these gone, do you want these gone?
There was another room. I said, right, we've identified someone in this next room. Do you want us to go in? Or you to go in? And they actually went in. But then we got 2 of our activists to go in with them to make sure that the other one was packing up and gone. Mm-hmm. And I was seeing now the last while back, Queens and Trinity, because there was direct actions in Trinity, had an encampment down there. Yeah. And both then have pledged that they're withdrawn, certain... Not everything, but certain connections with Israel. The campaigns will go on until there's absolutely no Israeli
connection at all.
But we do think that the direct actions was a catalyst for that to happen. Now, there's great work goes on within the Palestinian Assembly and the students, which is brilliant, and it all works hand in hand. Them constantly putting the pressure on them, having the visual protests outside and stuff is, and that grinds them down slowly. But we do think that our direct actions is a bit of a catalyst then to get them the
more pressure
on them. And it all works hand in hand.
And students paid a bit of a price for that, didn't they? Like, I mean, there's maybe a few lessons in that about how you proceed legally. I mean, we have a very good solicitor, Aidan. Well, I don't know if we want to mention his name.
Yeah, Aidan
Garland.
It's happy for us to. Yeah, like whenever I was arrested. So when I was arrested, we had actually went into a building we weren't supposed to go into because the technically could have said in that building.
Yeah.
We went past the police. We removed the barriers. We went down towards Clinton in a zone that was zoned off. Whenever I got arrested, I was getting charged with disruption, breach of the peace. I think there was 4 or 5 different things.
Aggravated trespass or something.
Aggravated trespass, and I think assault might have been on there too. And Aidan came in, and we demanded certain things from the police. We demanded to see the video evidence. We weren't doing it. We're in no hurry. We're not going anywhere until we get these, and all my charges were dropped that night. The lads who were a bit more naive than us, and they all got charged.
Yeah,
and they didn't have Aidan at that time. And that's not putting any slant on the other the solicitors or anything, but what I'm saying is Aidan's, he's an expert in this kind of thing. He's been doing it for a long time, and it does show the importance. But then also I'm experienced as well. And like we did have a bit of a brief before it, but we never thought the police were going to.
No, we didn't think they were ever going to be that heavy-handed.
You couldn't legislate for that, But it's another thing too is be aware anyone at all who's taking no matter how you may think this is we're not doing anything here. Always make sure that you're aware of your rights. Because some people, as soon as they're arrested, they're not aware of their rights and to be led in a certain path by interviews and stuff and like with solicitors and things and stuff. Don't realise the rights that they have. So everyone needs to know. And there's plenty of like I was at a workshop 2 weeks ago. Friends of the Earth give. In the town, in the old Tesco's building. It was very good, I went down, because I learned a few things from that as well, even though I've been at a long time. If you see these things coming up, anybody at all who's involved, not even in direct actions, just even, people are getting arrested on parades now and in demonstrations. And so be aware of your rights, and anytime you see a workshop or anything, go to it, or you can always ask any of the groups, I need some advice, and they'll be willing to give it to you.
Yeah. And we hopefully will at some point in this podcast have on someone we'll do an entire podcast on your rights, so people have a really solid grounding and all that. Something about the police that day, it was a wee bit different. It was the TSG you were placing it, it was like a tactical support group.
Yeah.
Basically thugs in many cases, and that's basically how they behaved on the day.
They want to do what they're trained to do, you know, they're all pumped up like, and yeah, I don't know if you saw there's one wee lad. The wee lad must have been more than 9 stone. And this guy, he must have been 12
twice.
16 stone. He was a massive. And he just grabbed him, just threw him. Just threw him right across the lawn, and they had the lads in the headlock. One of the fellas just got his arm out of a cast, and I had his arm pulled up, and he was saying, "Look, I'm just out of hospital with this," and they were just pulling up, and so they obviously were not too happy. They were pumped up for that. And it's not an occasion to deploy the rat squad, something like that.
No, so it's hard to know whether it was a combination of what you were talking about, like they were riled from what we'd done beforehand, and whether it's just like the usual sort of fawning before American power. Like if there's an American dignitary over, you've got to just bend over backwards to make sure you're grovelling to them as much as possible. Yeah. Whether that was a part of it too.
Maybe. But Clinton's been there before, and there's never seen that kind of. But then there's never been such a direct action before too. So maybe. Maybe that's part of it as well, like proving themselves to the masters kind of thing.
Yeah, that might have been an element in it. But the way we're policed generally is slightly more at arm's length compared to perhaps other places. Certainly the likes of Germany and France.
Yeah.
Like where they get away with nothing. You can't even wear a keffiyeh in Germany without getting hauled into the back of a police van. Whereas here people are sometimes surprised that the police are a wee bit more standoffish with us. Why do you think that is? And like,
I think you need a whole podcast.
You probably need to talk about the police, yeah.
I think one of the things is because of the legacy of the police here, they have to tread carefully sometimes. Sometimes they don't. As you've seen over the last couple of days, there's been a lot of criticism, some of the way they've been dealing with some of the demonstrations. But there's a bit of an irony here. We actually have more protection here than what they do have in England. And the reason being is whenever the Good Friday Agreement came about and the reform, the Pattern Commission came to reform the police, there was also, they said, the reform of the justice system as well. So there was things put in place, some things for the better, some things for the worse, But then whenever Sinn Féin accepted policing and justice, there was another agreement to supersede that agreement called the St Andrews Agreement. And then that Sinn Féin got what they call some concessions, and one of them was that we would adhere to the European kind of model
standard,
of so whenever Brexit happened, the Brits cut away from that, but we're still aligned to the European policies on that. So the right to protest here is stronger than what the right to protest is in England. But there's sometimes here the police, would you say, God, that was, they're very, very standoffish with us, they're very, very cautious with us. And we thought that was just a directive that's being given. But see the day that Keir Starmer was elected, the very next day was the first day that we had hassle from the police. And with it, at the time, we said, it was down in the Park Centre, and we're saying, is this some kind of is there a correlation with this? And we've seen that there were more keen to arrest, and there was actually a store manager from one of the stores, which I won't mention, said to us that the police had came to them and saying to them, these are your options, and we're building a profile on these people to bring charges. So from then on, they were actively trying to pursue us,
Yeah. And there's a lot of good videos on our social media about how you can potentially handle police. To some extent, it is about standing your ground and being assertive with them, isn't it?
Well, it is. The most important thing is know your rights. And once you know your rights, say they know that you don't know your rights, you're never going to have an argument with them, never mind, justify what you're doing. And you have to be assertive. There's a power dynamic there. They walk in, they're armed, they've got the uniform, and they've got the weight of the law behind them. And I think that's enough, but it's not enough. We have rights too. You have a right to protest. And if we know what that right is, what those rights are, and we're assertive enough and confident enough in what it is we're doing, then you do see the power dynamic changing. And anybody goes on and sees our videos, they will see that power dynamic changing. And it gets to the stage where the cops sometimes are actually running out as people are clapping as they're, and people are seeing this and going, geez, what, but it is a question of be confident in your argument, know your rights, and believe in what you're doing.
That's an empowering thing too, isn't it? Like when you have this belief that authority can't be challenged potentially when you're growing up or when you get involved in these sort of actions. And then when people actually do see the police being challenged, you realise to some extent it's it's a paper tiger.
It is,
Like,
yeah.
if you really take the lead in these things, you can get away with what you're doing, basically.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And the whole establishment present itself as a strong, tight thing, but it's not. You know, and that's why they want people to believe that you're an individual. You're never going to be able to achieve anything. They've used to get together. They don't want people to get to know this part in that. And you know, we have proven it. You know, we have shifted things because we united and we're strong in what we do. And there's more and more people do it. And it gets back to the other thing about the more people that hit the shops, the quicker they're going to give in to the demands that are being given to them. You know.
I should just follow on from the sort of subject of policing and prosecutions. You mentioned earlier, like, Sainsbury's have been going after us. So you've got the three of us who have been taken before the courts by Sainsbury's and the prosecution service for, it seems absurd to say it, but for putting a sticker on a SodaStream box. SodaStream is a product made in so-called Israel, and we've been going on as one of the things we've been stickering. So maybe talk a bit about that and like the implications for it, like this, like the potential return to a diplock court system, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, it's the charges relating to Sainsbury's. From day one, since we've been doing this way back almost 15 years ago, anytime we went to Sainsbury's, they have phoned the police. So they've got a history of doing this. And we've seen them arguing with the police, and the police saying we can't do anything about this, you know. But the first time, I was the first one to be arrested for this, and then two other members were arrested as well, subsequently in the weeks following. And for some reason, they've picked the SodaStream of all the things they pick. You know, it's made in the Bedouin communities. It's made in the part of the occupied territories where they're now facing the genocide. It's continuing from Gaza there, but they've always been, you know, that's where the settlers go, you know. And in the back of the box, it states made in harmony with Jews and Arabs in Israel, you know. So of all the products for us to make people aware of, that don't be buying this because of what they're telling you.
It's literally got an Israel flag on the back.
An Israel flag and all the back of it too, yeah. So we've been a few times the police have approached us, you know, and asked what we're doing. We've told them what we're doing. They've went. It's never been a problem. And then one day we noticed a very high police presence in the shop. So we knew something was going down. And then the police videoed us as we were putting the stickers on, and I got arrested. And then subsequently 2 more got arrested, and 9 of us got banning orders, was it?
Yeah, I think 8 of us at one point. Like one of our activists had a ban and got taken off straight away because she protested it, did a sit-down protest and shop it.
Mara, yeah.
But about 8 of us, I think, were banned.
So ban orders then were rolled out as well, and they were planned to roll out to all the activists until Mara, an elderly woman, sat down and refused to move out of the shop until they rescinded that, and she stayed there for hours and hours, you know, until they did, and then stopped giving them out. So we think maybe this is going to be a test case. We do think that, you know, and I think everybody's going to be looking to see how Sainsbury's are going to get on here. And the powers that be know that, you know, they know if they get this one, that they might think they've got the upper hand, but as time showed, any time in the past when the thing had put an obstacle in front of us, we see it as a platform, and we've always used it to get over, you know. So the 3 of us were being charged with criminal damage.
Yeah.
And initially, when we went to the court, we wanted to select to go to High Court, being heard in front of a jury. Our reasoning being there is that we're going to court, but we're not going to court as the ones who have been accused of a crime. We're going to be accusing our accusers of a crime. We wanted to bring Sainsbury's in about their procurement policies, their ethical policies. We wanted to also bring in experts, maybe from the UN and stuff, about how we have the legitimate right to do this when there's genocide going on, and people are blatantly complicit in that, you know. So that was our feeling on it, getting to a jury trial and having basically what we do explained, and also people exposed who are complicit in it. The first judge we're supposed to go in front of a judge, and the last minute the judge was changed. The morning the courtroom was changed and the judge was changed. That judge was very impatient, to say the least. This went on all day. We went up for initially was wanted to select to go to the High Court. He said no, it's not happening in my court, and he says the barrister, lucky enough we had our bar. Actually, we just thought this was going to be mentioned, so we says, well, we'll bring the barrister, won't we? And lucky we brought the barrister and Aidan, the solicitor, and the barristers had read out why we're legally entitled to the jury trial. And he said, right, I'll give you half an hour and come back in half an hour and have your legal arguments in place. And he says, this is ridiculous, we need 2 weeks
To do it,
2 weeks' notice at least. And he says, okay, I'll give you an hour. Be back here in front of me an hour.
Very generous,
we'll go through this. So in an hour's time, we went back, and Aidan and the barrister had a comprehensive argument at this stage, legal argument at this stage, and started putting to him. And he said, right, I'm going to adjourn this for another 15 minutes. I'm getting into my chambers to reflect, and I'll come back out and I'll let you know what's happening. Mm-hmm. An hour later, he came out and he looked a bit dishevelled, and he says, I'm not going to have Israel or Palestine mentioned in this court. Mm-hmm. And the bar says, no one's mentioned Israel or Palestine. What we're arguing is the right to have a jury trial. Yeah. So the barrister did say to him, look, we will be proceeding this further, i.e. in a judicial review, in front of a panel of judges. So he says, okay, I'm going to put this back for 2 weeks. And he said, but when you come back in 2 weeks, I'm not the one who made this decision here today. Mm-hmm. It's prosecution. So when we bring me into your judicial review, and the barrister says, but you're the one who's made the ruling here. So obviously he knew he was on very, very flaky ground.
Yeah, he just didn't want to be associated with it.
He just didn't know what to do. So then I put everything on hold. In the meantime, then the other 2 charges that came through for the other two activists, and then I got an additional charge as well. Mm-hmm. So then everything was kind of put on hold until this legal argument was played out, whether we're going to get a jury trial or not. And we were up in court again yesterday, and the prosecution the night before sent our legal team the day before, maybe the late afternoon. I think it was about 4:30, 4:45. He says he sent it a 6-page argument as to why we shouldn't get a jury trial, and the legal team looking at it says, yes, we can take a JR on this, but what they've presented back to us, it has opened a wee bit of maybe yes, maybe not. And in that case, they're going to go against us. And also, they made it abundantly clear that they're not going to give us any legal aid for taking this JR. So if you have the money, you can go down the road, which is going to cost tens of thousands of pounds. And if we lose it, then we're going to have to pay their costs as well. Yeah. But in a twist of fate then, they were looking at cases across the water with Palestine Action. And the first few cases of Palestine Action, they were using the defence with the Raytheon then used in Derry. A lot of years ago, for the greater good, they went into a Raytheon factory in Derry, wrecked the place, occupied it for 2 days, and then went to court. And they says what they did was to prevent a greater loss of life, with these rockets and stuff. So they won that case. And the first few in the Palestine Action ones were, it wasn't even getting to court. They were just, they were throwing it out, and that was the defence they were using. But then the legislation has been changed in England, where now if anyone goes to talk about why I did it, they're saying we don't want to know why you did it. All we want to know if you did it. So they actually stripped them off that defence.
It's like saying if there's a baby suffocating in a car, and you smash the window to stop that baby suffocating, we don't want to hear that you were trying to save a baby. All we care about is you smashed that car window, so you're getting done.
And they're not going to apply that to any other cases, but cases of this nature, So, but then the barrister pointed out, but in the magistrates' courts, they have not tightened that up to this degree. Right. So potentially we could still use the magistrates' court here to have our day in court, to have our trial as to who's complicit and what they're doing and why they're complicit and things like that.
Right. So we could actually talk about why we're doing what we're doing and put Sainsbury's on trial.
Again, it's an example of they think they put a barrier in front of us. Okay, there's that barrier. How are we going to get over it? We don't just stand banging and saying this is a disgrace. You look into it and you work away around and explore it. Because they're denying us the right to the jury trial. Okay, well, we're going to do it here in the magistrate and hopefully be able to do the same thing that we're going to do in front of a jury anyway. No. Now the only thing is the jury trial. You've got 12-year peers. This is a one judge. Mm-hmm. This is like the Diplomat courts. Yeah. When the Diplomat courts were brought in, I think it was 1972 here, and it says it was a temporary measure because juries were getting intimidated by what they called terrorists at the time. So there's no way of getting a fair trial. Now I suppose you have temporary measure. The Diplomat courts are still in place here today. And if we go down this road of everyone getting the magistrates court, it's like a Diplomat system under a different name. Mm-hmm. People who aren't involved in the struggle, but people who are involved in something that's going to undermine British policy or any government's policy. It's a very dangerous route that they're going down. And anybody who's coming behind us, so maybe there's added charges on to the criminal damage one that need to seriously challenge if we're going to try and keep it in a magistrate's court.
Yeah. So just moving on from that a wee bit. In terms of like our actions, is there anything you think we could have done better at, or anything we didn't? We sort of let ourselves down with a wee bit over the.
You learn as you go along. Like, and there
Yeah.
has been times like, you be doing something. We do it every day. We do it every day, 7 days a week. So you get into a bit of a, okay, we're doing today, and then an obstacle comes to you. Sometimes you get a wee bit not complacent, but you aren't as sharp as you were. And there's been times that there's been scenes like when people have been very aggressive towards us, and people's emotions be up. Especially for a while there, I noticed last year during the wave of far right attacks and stuff, there were a few people tailing us, who would be of that mindset. What about our own people, and they're only this, they're only that and stuff. And people were starting to get a bit annoyed about it. But then we did put a strict policy in place. We did not respond to that. We just ignored people like that. And so, I was a bit of a learning curve for that. I think maybe sometimes taking on too much as well, spreading yourself too thin. Because whenever you go to you're targeting one thing, there's about 20 things going off that one thing. It's all related to it. And, spreading ourselves too thin, I think sometimes might have been something we've learned from it. And
Because even for one single campaign, there's about a million things you could have filtering into that campaign, isn't there? Like, even for just the shop actions, you can be going after it from the trading standards route. You can be having the shop actions themselves. You can be putting in emails to ministers about what their culpability is, and
the unions, trying to talk to the unions.
There's a million different strands about that.
And then also the workers, letting them know their rights, and and then trying to get across that the workers aren't the people who were highlighting here is what's in the shelves, and so try and give them a wee bit of empowerment and a wee bit of reinsurance as well. Like, we're not one bit they have any. We don't judge them at all on what they have to do, what they have to do, and it's a very hostile world that we live in these days, with zero contracts and, union strength being weakened and things like that, So
it's a delicate balance between saying we don't hold workers accountable because we realise the position they're in, having management breathing down their necks all the time, but at the same time, potentially they do have the power to actually take a stand.
Yeah.
What we're encouraging them to do often is to take out a grievance complaint. Mm-hmm. Maybe you can go into a bit of detail about what that is. Just
what they can do is if they're unionised, they can get together and say create there's an issue, and then go to the unions. This is the issue. The issue is we're not happy handling Israeli goods. It can go down for moral reasons. I don't feel comfortable doing it, or for legal reasons. Are we going to be can we be deemed complicit in the chance? Because whenever all this stops, there will, and it's already starting. You see Jeremy Corbyn introducing the bill, how the British government are complicit, and you see ones going after the BBC, how they're complicit. So it is starting to happen already. And people will be held accountable. Some maybe soon, maybe not too soon, but there will, and there will be questions asked, and also people will want to look back because people's grandkids are going to say to them, what did you do during the genocide?
you don't want to be telling them I put Israeli stuff on the shelves.
But it'd be great if they could say, do you know what we did? We all got together and work, and we formed a collective, and we went to the union. We said, okay, this is an issue you need to deal with, and then put pressure on the union too. Like some of the unions would be saying we can't do anything about this. Well, then make them do something about it. If you have a grievance, a genuine grievance, then that has to be addressed. And if it isn't addressed appropriately by the management, then you have the means. And the most extreme was is withdraw your labour. But you go down them roads, And we have give information to the shop workers, and we do know that there's a certain amount of intimidation. We do see if a shop worker's anywhere near us, like you can see the managers looking at them and stuff in certain shops. So we do understand the intimidation stuff, but you don't have to do it in the glaring eye of the manager. You can get together themselves and go forward, bring it to the next stage of industrial action, and ones who aren't in a union, we do strongly recommend that they join a union.
Union, yeah. And what we've been hearing is like if you're all in the same union, and then you all put together a collective grievance complaint saying that you're not happy to handle Israeli products, you can then start a trade dispute and with the assistance of your union, and potentially from there you can get the shop to stop.
Yeah, and this is unions who have given us advice to us. This is unions who told us this is the way that it has to be done, so it can be done.
And the onus is on the unions at that point. I mean, people forget. I had forgotten when I started this that the Dublin Stores workers were actually directed by this is Dunn Stores workers who in the early 1980s refused to handle South African products. And then 3 years on from there, from 1984 to 1987, the Irish government had banned import of South African goods. So it happened very fast, and that was union-led. It was a union who had said to these workers, issued them a directive saying, don't handle South African products. The workers followed along, and after a long campaign, they won, and South Africa was kicked out of Ireland, basically.
And it's something that has to be drawn, people here need to draw inspiration from that, because that wasn't just Ireland doing that, moved to, that went around the world, it was like people here inspired that, and, now people here do have because they are like everyone keeps saying about how the Irish are so supportive and so connected to Palestine.
But the split there, isn't there, between the people and the government?
But the people have the power. Make the governments do it, make the unions do it, make whoever it is saying you can't do this, do it, and be inventive about what way. There's always a way around it, and if people want to get in contact with us, there's people in our group, vast amount of people from students right through to retired people and everybody in between. There's a wealth of knowledge there. If people want to get in contact, who's in their workplace or anywhere they see this influence and they're not too sure what to do about it, and we'd be all only too happy to give them advice,
And we do have sympathetic unions behind us as well, who swear they're prepared to take industrial action on these things. So you've obviously talked at the start about how you've been in the movement for a long time. Have you seen any? Presumably there has been pretty big changes, especially like in terms of the number of people coming in, but changes in the movement pre-October the 7th to now?
Massive. Like before that, there wasn't very many people doing what we're doing, and you were very, very had to be very cautious of what you said things. Like you couldn't have, if you had said the word Zionist, that was you were gone.
Yeah.
You couldn't have said colonial project, that's you're gone. It had to be the narrative. We were very restrained, and you have to understand too, because anything that's done or said, if we are doing this on behalf of BDS movement, then that's used against them as well. So you have to be very, very cautious about what you do and how you do it. From the end to now, there's been an intensity. Before then, it's another reason why we started doing what we're doing, because before then, there had been an attack on Gaza, as the Israelis call it, mowing the lawn, one of the disgusting terms that they use. Then you would have seen a lot of people maybe at a rally or at the International Wall and things like that. But then after that, things would have went away a bit, and so another reason why we says we'll start doing what we're doing to try and keep us continuous and things like that. And since then, what the Israelis have been up to, it's just people are just horrified, and people feel powerless, and people want to do what they want to do. So there's a lot more people willing to get involved, and also because of a public opinion, some of the things we do, we're getting away with now because of public opinion. It isn't because the authorities are more liberal in their thinking or anything. It's because of public opinion, and public support. So that I think that's been a good thing as well, and a lot more people see it for what it is now. This isn't, and you would have had this in our own community. A lot of people would come up to us and says, but the Israelis are just wanting their own security. People are trying to kill them. Now that doesn't even come into the equation. We're 99.9% of people know what it is. It's a colonial project, and it's coming to its final stages. So, I've seen a massive change in people's, not only their attitude, they're horrified of what's going on, but their in-depth analysis of it as well. People are reading a lot more. People are going to other sources, and people are understanding a lot more. What it is exactly what's going on.
It's like it's been like a massive consciousness raising exercise.
Yeah.
In terms of like the shift in community sport, I always think that's like a boon to workers as well. Like potentially, that's an additional protection to workers who want to take any kind of action if the community around them is sympathetic. It just makes it a lot harder for the store management to take action against those workers.
Definitely,
because they know the local community aren't going to tolerate it if they come down.
Well, could you imagine if someone, for example, Sainsbury's, saying they're the ones who bring us the quarter, mentioned Sainsbury's.
Yeah.
If they sacked one of their workers for refusing to put the stuff on the shelves, the campaign, that store would be closed down in 6 months. And I know it. The people in the area would not tolerate that. If anyone was courageous enough to do that, they would have massive community support for it, and there would be well thought out, and it'd be something. It'd be a very courageous thing to do, but it would also be rewarding for them because they would be the first. We've been hoping that someone will be the first to do this. And we understand as a collective it's better, but if you can't do it as a collective, if someone just objected to it and that happened. And it's easy for us to say it. We're not the ones having to pay the bills and stuff if we've done that, but there would be massive support there, and that store, it wouldn't be able to survive in the area,
I think it would just be very, very hard for a shop like that to get away with sacking a worker. Just in terms of that's one side of the community in north of Ireland. There are difficulties, though. I mean, people might see Ireland as being entirely pro-Palestine, and we talked about the split between the government and people, but there's also a split in this part of Ireland between different groups in society. So let me go into a bit of why that is, just for anyone from outside Ireland who might not understand why that is,
but even people within the 6 counties as well who don't really understand. Some people think because you put the Palestinian flag up, or they put the Israeli flag up, and there is a certain amount of that. Some people, I'd say most people, put them Israeli flags up, don't know why they're putting them up. But anybody at all who has got an understanding of what's going on will see why we identify so much with the Palestine, and why you can understand people from a unionist perspective would identify with the Israelis, because what's happening in Palestine is a carbon copy of what happened here. We had the clearing of the lands here. We had the plantations. The modern day they call them the settlers here. We had the genocide here. So all these things kind of, you can understand why. You can see why people gravitate towards that. Now, having said that, I have noticed, whenever this first happened, there was Israeli flags everywhere. There's been a big decrease in them. I do think that people are saying, geez, this is, you could not defend this, even from a historical point of view. Neither are the ones that still put them up, but they're, kind of people you would say, well, what can
defend that, I think, probably.
How can you justify that? But then that brings problems with us. Within a group, because we do go in sometimes into areas that be a bit more hostile. We do go in a lot less key, more low key. We do kind of make sure that there's a good squad of us, and we do before it make sure that everybody's on, exactly that we're protected and what we're doing, and it's a lot more strict than when we're doing it in areas that would be more sympathetic to Palestine. So, and there's other areas you just don't go into, because twofold there. One, the safety of the activists, but also it's like an advertisement for people who support Israel. And you go into an area, they're supporting Israel, and say don't buy Israeli products, they're all going to buy them. So it's counterproductive as well, And you don't want to go in just to prove a point. It has to be a strategic thinking why you're doing what you're doing. If you thought for a minute, just go into them areas and it's going to have an effect on the sales or whatever, do it. But if it's just to rattle people up, or to it's not something we'd be interested in.
No, well, that's what we see directed at us. It is essentially just people trying to rile us up.
Yeah,
and there's people who I don't even, like you say, I don't even know how ideologically committed they'd be. It's the people who will just shout Hamas terrorist or something that you know on the way past.
Unfortunately, we get a bit of it in our own areas too.
Yeah,
Well,
that's going to come on to that a wee bit actually later, or before we finish here, about what the rise of the far right, even in nationalist areas, potentially means for Palestine activism. But just we were talking about the government there. Why do you think there is that divide between the Irish government and the Irish people? What's the root of that?
Yeah, well, we have to understand that whenever this place was partitioned, there was 2 administrations put in place. There was one put in place in 26 counties and one put in place in the 6 counties. And their job has been from the inception till now is to look after the master, to do what the master's bidding. And it's went to the stage now where the government in the 26 counties is notoriously corrupt. Before this, with the whole NAMA selling of the properties, the bank scandals, and the burn envelopes, right from Bertie Ahern, Charlie Hawkey, the whole lot. There was a litany of corruption down there. So there's no such thing as a reflection. It's very parochial as well, and there's a dynasty in every area, like the grandfather, the father, the son. They're all the TDs, and all the ones are the councillors. So there's never been any proper kind of democracy. But also because of this, they're heavily reliant. It used to be heavily reliant on the British down in the 26 counties. Then they became heavily reliant on the Europeans, and also heavily reliant on the US, using the South as a money laundering exercise for Apple, Google, all those.
It's like a tax haven, basically.
Tax haven, yeah. So they don't respond to what the people want. They be told what to do by the people who are keeping them in power.
And that's probably what a lot of that, we talk about that enormous amount that's imported to Ireland from Israel. The vast majority of that is things like circuit boards.
Yep.
And those are probably circuit boards bought by American companies in Ireland to use in like server farms and things in Ireland. So that's to keep that hamster wheel spinning. The Irish government has to remain beholden to whatever the US wants, and the US wants genocide.
Yeah.
Obviously in Palestine.
And also the pharmaceutical companies, massive. It's a massive employer, particularly around the Cork area and things like that. Have lost that, and then Shannon as well. Like it's a prime example of not listening to all the people. We're supposed to be, the 26 counties is supposed to be a neutral countries in the constitution.
Yeah,
and they use that as a stopover. If I've used it from the days of the Iraq War and before, as a stopover for refueling the planes that are going to with the destruction on the peoples, be it in Iraq, Afghanistan, now in Palestine.
And like I said, that is not just mere complicity, it's participation. It's like actually being a crucial cog in the machine of all that. Conscious we're probably running out of time a wee bit, so probably one of the more important things to cover is like how would people replicate what we do? We touched on it a wee bit, but like if people wanted to start a BDS group from scratch and start replicating, say, the kind of actions we do, what would they do and how could we help?
There's so many different things people can do, and we always say to people whenever they get in contact with us, remember we've been doing this now for coming on near 15 years. So don't try to do what we're doing right away. Don't be like even standing outside a store with an information leaflet with the products that are on it and asking people not to buy those products in the store, writing to the store managers, to the head office, things like that. That's more than enough for anybody who's wanting to start a group. And you do notice that you do that for a while, and you do gain a bit more confidence. Some people may be seasoned activists who maybe been involved in things and say, we do think this is what they're doing here is pretty good, we're going to try and do it. We'll give you the information pack, just get in contact with us, we'll send it off to you, we'll have a meeting with you if you just want, over Skype or whatever, and then take it from there, so it's as I said at the start, it's a low level direct action. It's totally legal. It is, Now, I would say to people, be cautious, obviously don't respond to anything about, because people do try to rattle people, especially security guards and stuff. So get into a shop and removing the products, putting them into a trolley and bringing them to tills and asking them not to sell them is totally legal. Now, if they try, to get you to respond other ways, be very, very careful what you're doing. But if you just do that action, nothing's going to happen to you. You're well within your rights to do that. But as I said at the start, somebody standing outside the shop with a leaflet and telling people not to buy that. First of all, you're making people aware of what's in that shop, asking them not to buy it. But also then the head office of that shop, be it says Home Bargains, then they get another red flag on the map. There's another shop that's getting targeted there, and that's more pressure being put on the company. And also then the companies, they spend so much money on their image, how family friendly they are, how, they're for the community, and they do all these maybe charity things and stuff. But if there's the image that's being dragged down with your complicity in genocide, and the more people know about that, they do panic about it, and that's the overriding thing with these people. All they think about is the bottom line, and if it's getting damaged, then what to do about it, Well,
that's a crucial thing to bear in mind, isn't it? Like if anyone thinks they can appeal to these people's goodwill or their conscience, it doesn't exist. It's just purely about just their bottom line.
Just need to look at the way that they treat their workers.
So just in terms of like how effective you think all this is being, where would you see things going sort of in the near, medium and long term? Like, so where do you think activism will be in the next 12 months? Where do you think so-called Israel, Zionism will be 12 months, 5 years, 10 years from now? Where do you see all this going?
Yeah, well, I maybe I'm being delusional here, but I think it's coming over the other side of the hill. Especially it's been kind of, the last maybe month, 2 months, it's just been incredible, the amount of people who are coming out and speaking, like maybe from the entertainment industries and stuff, and, people who've been afraid to speak, and some people have said, I'm speaking out now, but I was afraid to speak out before. I do think there's a massive shift in public opinion, and I think that the propaganda, the propaganda war has been lost by the Zionist state and their the British government, the American government. I think they've lost the propaganda war, and now what you're seeing with these piecemeal statements particularly from Westminster, is trying some kind of fig leaf covering, you know. But that's a good sign that they're feeling that they have to say these things. Doesn't mean anything. Like England's still sending their spy planes over Gaza every day to identify the targets for the Israelis to bomb. You know, America's still sending over the money and the armaments to do it. So that's still happening. But public opinion is starting to shift them. As activism, I think people are starting to. Well, I say maybe 6 months ago, 8 months ago, you could feel people, especially after the breakdown of the ceasefire, people were very despondent. People were very, but we kept going, and I do see a new energy coming, not just within our group, but within other groups as well. And you see people doing a lot more, and you know there seems to be that snowball seems to be gathering. So I am hopeful. They can't, you know, they can't keep doing this. They can't get away with it, you know, and hopefully.
And I've more pessimistic moments. You think, are they just going to go full steam ahead and try and make it like a Native Americans kind of scenario where they just try and wipe them out and then hope that the world says, well, that was a shame, but let's move on. That's just something that happened.
Yeah,
that's the worst case scenario. But as you say, potentially the best case scenario is if there is a meaningful shift for the ones who have been allies for Israel up to this point.
Yeah,
like the likes of Britain and America.
Yeah. Which one? I remember there was a quote. I would say whenever I have Palestinian, we're talking to our Palestinian comrades, we'll have them over and stuff, and we do draw into our history about how they attempted the genocide, the clearing of the lands and stuff, and we say to them, we're still here. Now we're still occupied in the 6 counties, we're still fighting, but we're still here, you know. And like, one of the they tried the 400 years ago when they tried to clear the lands, and it says that the Irishman will be as rare on the Shannon as the Native American is on the Boston River. You know, and we're not, you know, and it does look, especially now, Jesus, like, and the Palestinians are giving us all the inspiration, how they're staying their ground, and, you know, they've been offered, they've been enticed, they've been tried to buy them, they've tried to pacify them, they've tried everything, but the Palestinians are staying their ground. You know, and whenever Ireland, the lands were cleared, everyone was in Connacht, you know, and during the time of our genocide, you know, 2 million died, 2 million people left the country, but we're still here, you know. And in a time like this, whenever Palestine, there's so much being thrown at them, they're standing their ground, you know. But do say, you know, and that's the hope I have for Palestine, that because of the people and the resilience, they're not going to eradicate the country, you know.
That means no excuses for us as well. Like if they're in the middle of a genocide, then we've no excuses for
and we all need to remind ourselves that, you know, sometimes you do get very frustrated, and sometimes personality clashes and stuff and things. People just need to take a step back from them when things like that happen and just think about Palestine, you know.
100%. Right. Well, I think that was very illuminating.
Yeah.
Hopefully not too long, but thanks for coming along and talk to us.
It's a pleasure. It's great, you know, to get the message out, and good luck in the endeavour in the future with you.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have you back on potentially in the future. Yeah.
Cheers. Good stuff. Okay.